my name is Amy Kelly, and I am the COO of DailyClout and the Program Director for the War Room DailyClout Pfizer Documents Analysis Project. And today I'm here with Dr. Chris Flowers. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hi, as Amy has said, I'm Dr. Chris Flowers. I'm basically a retired cancer radiologist working in the academic sphere, having worked at the University of California, San Francisco, in the University of South Florida, in the State Cancer Center here at Moffitt Cancer Center, and also finally at UCLA as a breast cancer researcher. I have since retired, and I'm now working as a medical reviewer and lead of some of the teams who are brought together by the War Room and DailyClout to investigate the Pfizer documents that were locked for 75 years until the FOIA was made a release of these in March of 2022.
Yes, and today Dr. Flowers and I are getting together to talk about a specific Pfizer document. It doesn't have a title, but it's an interim 6-month adverse events document. And the cutoff date for the document when the data was collected is March 13th, 2021. So it went from the time of the EUA, which was December 11th, 2020, through March 13th, 2021, and looked at adverse events and the clinical trial participants. And in particular, we're here today to talk about the cancers that are in this document. And I went through and extracted from it all the different ones that were listed and shared that list with Dr. Flowers. And we're just going to discuss some things that jumped out at us about it. So Dr. Flowers, what was your initial take upon seeing the list?
I thought, well, this seems to be a very small list when we've been looking at the post-marketing experience 5.3.6 document, which was basically Pfizer's post-marketing experience from the first 3 months of the trial. So this is different. Their 6-month analysis is actually only 4 months of data of their trial patients, whereas the post-marketing experience is from all the sources they got reporting back to them from VAERS and the vSafe system. So there are multiple systems they use to collect the data. And when the vaccine had been given to so many people, it was surprising to me just how many cancers and sort of excess cancers were being found. And the types of cancers, including rapidly growing cancers, which are normally slow growing, benign type of things. I also began hearing from colleagues about how some of the low-grade tumors that normally present, and there's no real hassle. You get on, you surgically excise the lesion. You may have radiation, or maybe even not need radiation, just some tamoxifen or an aromatase inhibitor to try and prevent the growth of or the recurrence of the tumor. But instead of these tumors being small and just stable, really, over years, these things suddenly have changed into fast-growing tumors. This is something that's been found by a lot of pathologists who've been raising queries over the sheer numbers they're seeing. And they're finding colleagues coming to them saying, what's going on? Why are we getting these very fast-growing cancers where when we initially saw this patient, it was a low-grade cancer? So that was number one, because that was partly based on my personal experience and what I'd heard from other people. But then again, it was the broad depth of it. Was almost like you were looking through a medical dictionary, and you just plow through page after page after page. Yes, tick and tick. Yes, we're seeing that. Yes, this was in a trial of just under 44,000 people. Only half of those got the vaccine, and yet, I mean, that's a small amount of people, and in a small amount of time, you don't expect to see much in the way of cancer. Yes, there is occasional people, just by serendipity, they happen to be diagnosed with a cancer at that time. So there's this background of cancer, but then you've got, what's happening? Why are we getting so many cancers suddenly turning up? And so that's the sort of thing that's raised questions in our mind. And as pure scientists, we're there. Science is to ask questions. We're constantly asking questions. We're not even satisfied with, oh, yes, we can identify that. But then you say, but why is it happening? What's the underlying cause for it? What can we do to prevent this happening? Are there any treatments for it? If they're not treatments, what is the mechanism by which it's working that we can interfere with? We can produce an antibody or a drug that might help stop these cancers growing. So it was perturbing to me to see it, but also to hear it from other people. It's not just me. and again, you as a layperson, you're coming to this, from scratch and seeing this huge list. I mean, I'd turn around to you and say, what is your reaction? This is only 4 months after the trial started. What's going on?
I found it very shocking to look through. One thing that jumped out at me, it just seems like there's an enormous amount of breast cancer throughout this in various stages and different, I don't know what the proper term is, almost varieties of breast cancer occurring. I noticed one thing that jumped out at me was there was a lung cancer situation where they listed an onset date for the lung cancer of December 4th, 2020. And then the death of that person was January 19th, 2021. So it just seems like it went lightning fast from onset to death. That person must have given them that onset date of December 4th because it's a little just before the EUA, but still very quickly. I noticed a prostate cancer that had a very high rating for how far gone it was as well. A biliary cancer that had metastasized to the liver, just all different types, prostate cancers. I was shocked by what all is on here as a lay person looking at it. I know you said that the list didn't seem that long to you, but it looks like there's a little over 70 different kinds, or 70 different instances, I should say, of cancers in this document in that short period of time, and that seemed like a lot to me. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on what the mechanism may be that's causing so many to occur, as well as that they seem to be blowing up very quickly into very serious cancers.
Yeah, so we're thinking also of a time, it was approximately a year after COVID started. So and most cancer screenings stopped during that time. And then when they restarted, they found most patients had enlarged lymph nodes, and that people didn't know what to do with that, because normally when you see those sort of lymph nodes that we began to see, you're querying whether the patient has developed a lymphoma, which is a cancer of the lymph nodes. So there were a lot of unnecessary biopsies done at that time, because it turned out this was just reacting to the COVID, and no one knew that even after you'd had a vaccine, that you get these huge enlarged lymph nodes, and they'd last for months. It's not like when you get a cold or a sore throat and you end up with enlarged lymph nodes in your neck. Okay, they're sore and tender for about a week, and then they go away. But in this case, they were under the armpit, and they were very large, very hard. And to all extents and purposes, we thought, well, this must be malignant until proven otherwise. So we were there in the situation, well, you've got to biopsy it, because you can't possibly leave it like that and say, oh, I think it's probably nothing, when it has all the characteristics of a malignancy. So you can't leave something that looks malignant, treat it like a benign thing. It is, you've got to treat people differently. And
yes,
so I think
I remember actually when in 2021, to your point, going in for a mammogram, several months after the vaccines had rolled out. And, obviously I've had them done before as well. And when I went in, a part of their paperwork was to fill out a form asking if I'd been vaccinated or not. And I went and asked them, why did they need that information? And exactly what you said is what they said. They said, we're seeing extremely swollen and inflamed lymph nodes in our vaccinated patients. So if you have been vaccinated, we want to know that, so we'll be aware that that might be the situation with you.
Did they happen to ask you for a date of vaccination as well? So they had a time scale, or was it just a tick box for, yes, I have been vaccinated?
It was just a checkbox, more or less, saying that you had been, from what I remember. But also, we weren't that far into the vaccination program
I was going to say,
at that point.
That is probably understandable at that stage if it was April, because I remember I got my first COVID vaccine, first shot of Pfizer in beginning of March, and then 21 days later, 21, notice that very important date, 21 days for my second dose of vaccine was also in March. So yes, April was very, very early on, whereas I guess now it's more routine to ask, if you've had a COVID vaccine in the last 3 to 6 months, what was the date of your last vaccine? Was it a booster? What have you had all the other ones? Because people react very differently to the vaccines. I know when I had my booster, I had pain in my arm and swelling of my arm for, it was going on for at least 3 months. And even when I lifted my arm, I felt a pain, and I've never felt pains like that from regular vaccinations. And this was done by a trained nurse in a university hospital setting. So it was a bit unusual, I thought, until of course I started seeing the documents, and then I'm beginning to understand, well, where all of this is going. This is the problem, and that's why we're building a set of videos on, did you know, from Pfizer's own words, because until we saw these documents, we really had no idea just how bad the situation was at that time, and really nothing's been done about it. And of course, we're not allowed to question it, but we do need to ask the questions. We do need to think about, well, if it is causing excess cancers, how's it doing it? Is there any difference between Pfizer and Moderna? Number one, because those are both mRNA lipid nanoparticle vaccinations, very, very similar platforms, which is a new platform. Whereas AstraZeneca, which was mainly used in the UK and Europe, was an adenovirus. Is basically an old-fashioned way of doing it, but they produced the spike protein again, which was then supposed to trigger the body to produce more spike protein. And now in retrospect, we realize spike protein probably wasn't the best way to go.
Even the new Novavax one has spike protein as well, right?
They were all targeting the spike protein. They didn't go for the mRNA. Now, in conventional vaccines, they normally go for this DNA or RNA, depending on which type of virus it is. And so you can recognize this foreign material as it comes into your body. But until COVID came along, until the vaccines came along, we didn't really know, how did it get into cells so quickly? Or at least the public didn't know. The FDA knew, the pharma knew, because that's how they were targeting. They knew that it goes into the body and it hits the ACE2 receptors. It binds, it's got this, it's called avidity, a real desire to attach to the ACE2 in a receptor, which sits on the surface of a cell and allows passage of something into a cell. So the idea was, along comes a spike protein, it opens up the channels, and then bang, the mRNA floods through into the cell, and so the cell becomes infected with the mRNA. So we didn't really know about that. And when you look back at the data and this platform, the mRNA lipid nanoparticle platform, people were warning in scientific papers back in 2012 that this is a potentially dangerous platform. And that's why we have to sort of think, well, when's the best time if we're going to develop something on this platform? When would we use it? Well, the first thing, like Dr. Malone was looking at, was trying to attack cancers of the brain. Now, these glioblastoma multiforme, which is basically a very heterogeneous type of tumor that is a rapid growing tumor in the brain and kills people very, very quickly. Normally, you can't get chemotherapy into the brain. This is because you've got something called the blood-brain barrier, and nothing crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's your brain's protective structure. It's like your outer skin. You don't want it penetrated. So part of the thing about using lipid nanoparticles was, oh, it can get through the blood-brain barrier. Well, that way, perhaps then we could use that platform, not using mRNA, but perhaps stick some chemotherapy in there, and then it can get across the blood-brain barrier into the brain. And because the patient otherwise is going to die, okay, there may be problems with the lipid nanoparticles and things, but we don't have to worry about it because the benefits outweigh the risks.
Right.
Now you can let's compare that. Let's compare that to what's going on in the kids. So how many, Amy, tell me, how many kids get COVID and die? What chance of that happen? What is the chance really of that happening?
Minuscule, tiny percentage, under 1%.
So
well under.
So
1%.
can you tell me then why the FDA and Pfizer are happy with using a platform that's known to be dangerous and that travels to all sorts of parts of the body? Why would they allow that to occur or be given to anybody who's at minimal risk of dying of COVID when there's more of a chance of having a severe adverse reaction to the platform that's being used? And this is the thing that's bothered me as soon as I came across it and started watching the VB-PAC meetings to authorize or recommend the use of vaccines in younger people. It doesn't make sense. I'd been talking to patients for many years, trying to educate people about the benefits and risks, because people, if you won't remember, you're far too young to remember this, but back in the day when we started doing mammograms, people were worried that, oh, I'm going to light up with radiation getting a mammogram done. But the radiation dose for mammograms, even at that time, I mean, it was very tiny compared to having a chest X-ray done. But we used to compare it. Well, it's like crossing a main road when you've got the white walking man. The risks are there. Someone could come around the corner and knock you down. You might have a chance of, basically it's minimal. It's like smoking 2 puffs of a cigarette, things like that, And so you try to balance the risk versus the benefits of picking up a cancer early. And that's the basis of cancer screening is, it's always balance of benefits versus risks. So, if you can do something that's not going to cause problems to people, that's going to improve their chances, even if it's only 30 people out of say 100,000 who actually have a cancer diagnosed early and don't die from it, it's worth it because you haven't actually caused harm to the rest of the population. So just compare that to what's happening with this vaccine, which we know does have recognized side effects. Even the FDA recognized myocarditis as a severe adverse reaction.
So knowing what you know about the components of the vaccine, the lipid nanoparticles, the mRNA, there's some ingredients have been disclosed, many ingredients haven't been disclosed. Is there something that you know about from all of that that you think would be causing all these different types of cancers we're seeing, as well as making them accelerate so quickly?
Yeah, I think there are two main things. One of them is the lipid nanoparticle aspects, of which very little is known. There's very little research done on the harms of lipid nanoparticles. There are some of the components of the lipid nanoparticles we know are carcinogenic, like this polyethylene glycol, which is ALC0135, which is included in the Pfizer product in the lipid nanoparticle. There's a similar one that's used by Moderna, and you can go and research these chemicals that are used, which make up nearly 50% of a lipid nanoparticle, and you can see it says this is for research use only, but it's being used in the COVID vaccine, so it's just for research. Wonder what that tells us.
So then you have that carcinogenic material that's being injected and traveling all over your body.
Yeah, the big problem with this is, I mean, normally most of us of a certain age know polyethylene glycol because we've had colonoscopy prep, and we know how bad it is because of the way it works. What it does is, when you drink it, it basically loosens your stool, which is what it's supposed to do, but it also draws water out of your body. It's called an osmotic diuretic. So it pulls water out of your body into the colon and makes watery diarrhea. But the good thing is, your gut is separated from the rest of the body as a tube starting up here and ending in the nether region. It never gets into your bloodstream. And the problem, as we know, is the lipid nanoparticles are injected into the body, and we know that very rapidly, within a few hours, it disseminates around the body. And it's been found that the ALC0315 product is one of the things that makes it really easy to get into liver cells, which is worrying. I mean, I can't find any evidence. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that field. I don't know if this was known about beforehand. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But that is a concern. That's another paper that's come out in the last week. But more importantly, I think a lot of people have raised concerns about the use of the spike protein. The spike protein seems to be very inflammatory, and it's found a lot of these patients who, or they're not patients, they're just normal human beings, often youngsters, young people just dying suddenly. There was a coach who died. Another football player died. There was a young radio presenter in the UK who died on air while he was doing his program. He just suddenly stopped talking and died.
And do you think it's
post-mortem
from
negative?
the inflammatory response then that's happening there? Well,
the big problem is that I think it's been talked about elsewhere, but is the fact that when we're doing these post-mortems, the autopsies, we're not looking for the spike protein, but when they have done, they found that in these expired patients there is evidence of plenty of spike protein around the myocardium. It's all through the heart muscle. It's all through around the electrical pathways of the heart, which are absolutely vital to make the heart contract and relax at the right time. So that is a worry. And also the spike protein, as we mentioned before, has this avidity to join with the ACE2 inhibitor, which is widespread around the body, predominantly in the lungs, which is why people presented with COVID originally as sort of like a pneumonia, a flu-like illness affecting the periphery of the lung. Their CT scans, they had little scattered white opacities throughout, fine opacities throughout the lungs. And basically it made the lungs go really, really stiff. And basically doctors, my own profession, made a mistake initially of deciding when patients are like that, what we need to do is to intubate them and put them on a ventilator. Unfortunately, that was a death sentence because you can't ventilate someone whose lungs are basically full of inflammatory product. You know, it just doesn't work like that. You've got to treat patients before they get to that sort of situation. But that's all induced by the spike protein. They know all about that with the ACE2 receptors. What was a little bit more concerning was a paper that came out of Guangdong in China, which was basically talking about one of the aspects of the protein that people have been most worried about. That's something known as the furin cleavage site. Furin is a part of the buildup of this protein, and it seems to have an affinity for going certain places and attacking certain things. And the Chinese researchers have found a link between this part of the spike protein and adenocarcinoma of the lung, and it appears to be changing the genetic mechanism. Well, there's something going on with the metabolism. I still don't completely understand the precise way that it's doing this, and I've asked other colleagues to see if they can give us a better idea, a better understanding of what exactly might be happening that causes the cancers to go crazy. But this seems to be one of the mechanisms, and it's always bothered me. Again, there are too many things that bother me about this spike protein, and it's like when Pfizer decided to produce this new vaccine for Omicron. It was going to be bivalent, and what were they going to do? They were going to use, half of it was going to be the original Wuhan strain. Why? That's gone, been done. We're over that now. Omicron, well, that's far less infective unless it's been via the Boston University labs where they've been trying to make this more lethal. That, by the way, folks, that is not conspiracy theory. That is real. So
it's documented, yes.
Documented, and they Boston University are defending their research. So they're still using the dangerous parts of the spike protein, and there is no need for this. You know, COVID isn't really a problem anymore. I mean, although the president hasn't removed the state of emergency, effectively everyone knows COVID's over. It's no longer a talking point until suddenly, oh well, COVID's going to come back in the fall with monkeypox and respiratory syncytial virus, which used to be a rare infection of the lungs of infants. So we see in pediatric medicine, we'd see it quite a bit. We'd have 1 or 2 patients in hospital out of the whole population every winter. But now they're worried that we're all going to get that. We're going to get this new type of monkeypox, even if you don't have the same proclivities that people who normally get this encounter. So
I saw how RSV was showing up out of season last year as well, and not only, like you said, in children, but also in adults and out of season. So that was very unusual as well.
Yeah, and all these extra infections, I think it sort of jives with the theory that part of what the vaccine is doing is actually influencing our own immune systems, our innate immune system, and it's sort of depressing it somehow. We're now allowing what would normally be non-lethal infections and you know, very common otherwise infections. Our bodies would normally deal with it. We wouldn't have any issues. Maybe it's actually reducing our immune system and our ability to fight these more common infections. I mean, when the vaccines first came out, you know, I thought, oh, this is going to be great because the common cold, half of those are coronaviruses, the rest are rhinoviruses, and so we're not going to suffer from common colds anymore. You know, flu is different because that's H1 and N1 and all these other different things that we have to judge. But even then, these flu vaccines, I remember last year they told us it was only 10% effective. Why are we taking a vaccine that's only 10%? You've got a 10% chance that it might be of benefit to you. I mean, okay, Medicare
and now they're
for it,
creating they're creating the mRNA flu vaccine now. They're in phase 3 for that, and talking about combining COVID and flu vaccines into one.
It's very concerning. I've already told my primary care I'm not having any more vaccines. Thank you very much. Certainly not if you're only producing this, what's called a polyvalent or recombinant flu vaccine, that is mRNA, folks. Please avoid that at any any chance you have. Just I think we ought to start a new campaign that just says, just say no.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Instead of for
that.
drugs,
That was,
like back in the old day.
Yeah, back in the day, you know, it's like, you know, we just need to get ourselves healthy, and there's a lot of things that have come out that have been good. Like, we've started to wash our hands more frequently, especially our grubby children. They've actually learned to wash their hands, which is really good.
Yes, and not touch your face as much
not
too.
touch your, yeah, because I mean, that is a tick. You sort of grow up; it becomes a habit you grow up with when you're young. And so that there has been a benefit from that point of view. But you know, the real problem, as you say, is, you know, is what's happening with the spike protein and the development of cancers and excess cancers. And I'd love at this stage.
Yeah, I have a question for you about this list. It's a little bit putting you on the spot, but I think you may know and I don't. One thing, or two things actually, that I noticed recurring through this list was a bunch of different types of carcinoma and a bunch of different mentions of neoplasm. And I don't know what those two things mean and how they're different. Are you able to explain that?
Let me explain that. So a neoplasm is Greek for a new growth. Plasm is growth, new.
Okay.
So neoplasms can be benign, or neoplasms can be malignant. So you sort of go down that sort of classification. There's the split, benign and malignant. So, but benign can be slow growing benign and not kill you. There can be benign tumors that are faster growing, and depending where they are, they have the potential to kill you. But there's no urgency to get on and deal with them. Then you've got the malignant neoplasms, and they're divided up by different types of the underlying cell. So if it comes from
see that here, malignant neoplasm of the prostate is one that's on the list.
Well, that's only by site, whereas there's a pathological description. So you'll see adenocarcinoma. So the origin of that cancer is from the glandular part of tissue.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So for example, lung cancers, you've got adenocarcinoma of the lung, which is from deep down in the lung. And then you've got squamous carcinoma of the lung. Totally different. Squamous is actually skin. So it's pathologically a different type of cancer, different types of outcomes as well. So, you know, cancer is very, very complicated. And I can tell you, over my lifetime of working in cancer and cancer research, we started off in med school learning the Krebs cycle. I don't know if you've ever heard about the Krebs cycle, and that's how glucose gets digested down and then gets into this circle whereby ATP is made, which is the energy of that's provided to the cells to do things, to do any mechanism, whatever they're doing. Well, the same occurred with cancer. We knew very little about it, and yes, they were growing quicker. And then we said, well, there's a few genes that are sticking on the side that seem to influence it. There's a type of surface protein. Oh, let's target that surface protein. And then so we had some success with that. Then we realized actually there's a whole chain of different things that's going on in the body going up to this. And so when you look at the way metabolism and the way cell division is structured inside the cell, is a very complicated process by which a whole load of different enzymes are being used. Some of these enzymes are there to stop cells dividing unnecessarily. So they're called check inhibitors. They're basically they're regulators. So it's like having something on the brake lines to make sure you don't press down the brakes when you're accelerating too quick. Otherwise, you'll damage your brakes and things like that. And if you take off the brake regulator, it's like you've got you're biking along on your cycle. You're holding the brakes. That's the regulator. You're not moving. But as soon as you take your foot off the brakes and you're going down from the top of Pikes Peak, nothing's going to stop you. It's going to go crazy. Boom. And that's what happens with cancer. So you'll probably hear doctors talking about a cell line being unregulated. And that means there's no way of stopping this growth, so it keeps going. And so we're looking at different types of treatments to interfere with that process. We want to get it stop growing, otherwise, it can come back. So even if you try and take the whole thing, there may be some cells around, but unless you check those, they're coming back again. So that's the sort of theory of chemotherapy, is that we're trying, anything that's left behind, we're trying to deal with and stop it growing again. But the trouble with chemotherapy, as you know, is it kills everything. It just doesn't kill the cancer cells. And that's why people have these awful side effects.
And then about the carcinoma, what does that mean?
That's just a broad term for cancer. It doesn't tell you anything much. It's just, yes, I've got cancer.
And I did see several references through the list to where it was saying it's metastasizing, or like here, metastatic brain cancer, biliary cancer metastatic, and it metastasized to the liver, all different types of that as well, which that just means it's spreading, right? When
metastatic cancer basically means it's been able to seed itself elsewhere. So it's like you've got a weed, and it's there, that all the seeds are on there, and you blow it, and suddenly the seeds are spread everywhere. So it's got potential to spread around the rest of the body.
Yeah. Well, this has been so helpful to go through this. And when I post this, I'm going to post this list with it and a link to the original document so people can see what we're talking about. But I really appreciate you spending this time with me today to go over this.
You're welcome, Amy. And you'll see just how mind-boggling it is that we happen to have so many cancers that have occurred in the time since, the very short time since the vaccination program started.
I did notice also, related to what you're just saying, that you can't just search for the term cancer when you're searching the documents. You get certain results back with that, but a lot of times it's naming a specific type of cancer, or using different terminology than you might initially think of. So thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we enjoyed you being with us today and appreciate you taking time to learn about this.
Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf of DailyClout, and I am asking you to please, if you like the video you just saw, support us, become a member, donate. You can send checks to P.O. Box 24, Millerton, New York, 12546, or go to DailyClout, DailyClout, become a member or donate. Thank you so much for your support. Every penny goes for paying our hardworking staff, paying hosting costs, and paying our lawyers who have been leading the fight to keep you safe and free, to keep the Constitution safe and to keep you free. Thank you so much.